momentarily, and they'll be on deck to help you not only get registered for quorum, that's so we know you're here and we can make sure that we have a sufficient body to conduct the business of convention, but also they will be here helping you during the day when it comes to voting. After you are registered, there will be out on the plaza some coffee and refreshments in the morning. And then after that, you can come in and be seated. Bishop Austin is waving. Over to the left here is an area for people who need closed captioning. We have a closed captioning screen ready to go. We also, Ellie, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe we have a link to closed captioning as well, so you can get it on your devices. Ellie is nodding yes, that is a good sign. Question came up, can we bring water into the nave? The answer to that is also yes. You may bring water into the nave, but please do not bring coffee or any other drinks. Items will also be shown on the large screen up above. And then back over to the right, we have an area dedicated for members of convention who speak Spanish as a primary language. This will be an area for use of our beloved members of Spanish-speaking community here in the diocese. And this is an example only. Call it a prop, just for your reference. We will have 3 microphones, one positioned here next to the north transept. We'll have a central microphone positioned here in the middle. It'll be placed after the liturgy tomorrow. And then we'll have a third microphone over here near the south transept. These will be the microphones you can approach at any time you wish to address the convention or during debate. Ellie, anything I am missing? Bathrooms are downstairs. That's the end of the walkthrough and the layout. Any questions about that, you can go ahead and put them in the Q&A. I'll pass things back over to Ellie.
The next thing. The next thing I just want to remind folks is you saw that we have captioning. The link for that is available on our website. You can go to the calconvention.org website and look for the captioning button. And you can also turn on captionings in this meeting as well. Additionally, you saw the Spanish interpreter. We will be having that throughout the entire convention, and it's just a nice reminder that if you are going to be speaking, for anybody who's speaking tonight or tomorrow, please speak slowly so that our interpreter can easily translate what you are trying to say.
I missed something very important, and that is for those of you who need to borrow a device for tomorrow's meeting, there is a table opposite registration for you to pick that up tomorrow morning. So look for that if you need to borrow a device for voting. Again, a reminder, bathroom locations, the closest bathrooms to the main convention space will be down on the lower level near Gresham Hall in the hallway. I believe there will also be bathrooms available across the plaza in the chapter house. Also across the plaza in the chapter room will be a few exhibitors who are exhibiting for our convention tomorrow, and you'll have a chance to check out their space. Okay, I'm getting a no on that.
We'll have one exhibitor who will be in the space.
Ah, okay. In the space here in the cathedral? Okay, that is good to know. So watch for that. Lunch will be available on the plaza if you've reserved it. And if you're bringing your own lunch, you can join the folks on the plaza at lunchtime. A big and very important change to the way we conduct our debate. Sorry, I was not unmuted. That's a double negative. I was muted. You can see I'm in secretary mode. Okay, let me try that again. So we are doing something, we're making a couple of very important changes this year that you need to know about, particularly when you are addressing the convention, either for debate or to make a motion. First change involves self-introductions. When you rise to speak, we're asking that you introduce yourself and your congregation and your congregation's location. But we also ask you to use the title of address you prefer, if any, when you're introducing your own name. An example would be Dr. Fernando Swithin, or Miss Jane Doe, or Mother Molly Parsons, like that. And that will help the chair and other members of the leadership address you in a way that's respectful over the course of conversation and debate. The second thing you need to know is we're going to strictly enforce times this year. So you'll see a clock appear when you are addressing convention. Normally you will have 2 minutes to speak. If you require non-simultaneous translation, you will have 4 minutes to speak. When the clock runs to 0, the microphone will be turned off. It's that simple and straightforward. But that helps us maintain the integrity of the agenda better and also respect, out of fairness, everyone's time to speak. So just be aware of that. When that clock hits 0, the microphone will be turned off. When you approach a microphone, and particularly during debate, this will be important. There will be red cards and green cards available, as there were last year. A red card means you wish to speak in opposition to something, or you wish to make an amendment. A green card means you wish to speak in favor of something. And that will be important for our chair, Bishop Austin, because when it comes time to debate, he will do his best to alternate between speaking in favor and speaking against a motion. Amendments, this is very important. Listen carefully. If you wish to make an amendment to any of our resolutions, you need to submit that amendment in writing to the secretary. Email works best. You can send it to secretary@diocal.org. Ellie, can I ask you to put that in the chat? secretary@diocal.org. I will receive your amendment. Now, here's the next thing. If you send me an amendment, you will receive an acknowledgement from me by email. If you don't receive an acknowledgement from me, try again, and otherwise reach out to Ellie and we'll make sure we get that. So watch for an acknowledgement from me if you send an amendment. I need to have your amendment as soon as possible. That helps us work it into a slide so we can present it for convention's consideration. If you can get it to me this evening, that would be terrific. If you need to get it to me tomorrow, please try to get it to me by the middle of the morning, about 10:30. And we'll make announcements about this as well over the course of the morning. Registration tomorrow opens at 7:45. And then if you are needing to change an alternate to a delegate, what you need to do is email me with the name of the new delegate, and the person who needs to do that normally is the cleric in charge or the lay leader in charge of your congregation. But I need that in writing as well to conform to our rules and canons. If you have an alternate coming in tomorrow who hasn't registered at all, I can still get that permission in writing, and then we can have the alternate registered as a delegate at the registration tables. Okay. Ellie, do you want to continue about bring your own devices?
Yes. Please plan to bring your own device. Plan to bring one that is fully charged. It is really helpful when we are all voting tomorrow on resolutions and nominees. We will have some charging spots available around the space, but you will also need to bring your own cord to plug into those spots. So bring your device, please bring it fully charged. And if you expect that you will need to charge your device at some point, bring a cord to do so.
Terrific. And just a reminder, to double tap, vPulse support will be available all day. We have our tech chaplains who will be at the ready to help you. All you need to do is raise your hand to indicate you need support, and they will come and meet you where you are in the nave.
Our agenda is posted on the DIAL-CAL Convention website, which includes the agenda for this evening and for tomorrow. So if you are looking for the agenda, it is available. And I will also drop the link for that in our chat this evening.
When you arrive tomorrow, you will receive a pamphlet with the complete liturgies for the day, morning, noon, and evening. So make sure you hang on to that and keep it at the ready, because we'll be going back to that 3 times tomorrow. And I'm going to say it one more time. When the clock hits 0, the microphones will be turned off. So you can keep that in mind. That will be regulating our time tomorrow during discussion, speaking, and debate. We are very excited to see you in the morning. And again, tonight, as we move through the rest of our online session, as you have questions, seeking answers, just put them in the Q&A and we'll be happy to address them as we go. All right. So with that, we are a little bit ahead of schedule.
Further, Richard, there's a question in the Q&A from Stephanie Green about the verbal process for presenting an amendment. Could you go over that, please?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that, Stephanie. So the verbal process for presenting an amendment is important. And in my response, when you all send amendments through to me, I will tell you the process in order to make the verbal amendment. I'll describe it here just for reference right now. So once an amendment is filed and you've heard back from me, when it comes time to debate a resolution, you can approach any one of the 3 microphones and hold up a red card. And when you are called upon by the chair, you can say, "I rise to make an amendment." And at that point, we should be able to take the language that you've sent and we'll put it on the screen so convention can see it. And you can read out or describe the amendment and then say, this is important, if there's a second, I'd like to speak to it. Normally there will be a second because we're in a pretty friendly crowd here. And at that point, then the chair will ask you to speak to the amendment, why you think it's important. Okay. So I think we're ready to move on to the presentation and questions and answers on the diocesan visioning process. So I will turn the floor back over to Bishop Austin.
And I will turn the floor over to John and Nancy.
Thank you, Bishop Austin, and good evening, everyone. I'm John Kirkley. I'm the rector at St. James in San Francisco. I'm also a member of Executive Council and have the privilege of serving as chair of the Strategic Vision Committee. And my partner and colleague and becoming a dear friend, Dr. Nancy Weens, is also here, and she'll be available as part of the Q&A tonight. She is serving as the consultant to the process. Our presentation is really going to be in 3 parts over the course of convention. So tonight, I'm going to be providing a fairly high-level overview of the work of the committee, where we've been and where we're going. Tomorrow, you will hear much more from Bishop Austin and from Dr. Weens about the results of the listening sessions, what we heard from the people of God in our diocese over these past couple of months. And then as part of our reception and reflection and integration of that learning, members of Dispatch of Business have put together a very creative exercise to invite us into deeper connection with one another as we reflect on what we've heard. So those will be kind of the 3 pieces. So tonight will be the general overview. Tomorrow will be the heart of what many of you are probably most interested in, is to hear what we've learned from one another. So Ellie, can you bring up the slide deck, please? So this is the report of the Strategic Vision Committee. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So what is the SVC? I'm going to use that shorthand since it's easier to say. So the SVC was actually established by Diocesan Executive Council, well, not yet, last year. It was a part of a larger work of council to develop and staff committees of council to resource the work of council. And part of what we realized is that we needed a dedicated group of people, a space within our governance structure to think about long-term adaptive change and how we can best respond to the opportunities and challenges we face as a diocese, to have a space to think in together and to pray in together about the future. With the election of our new bishop, and based on a very clearly expressed desire in our diocesan profile, we also knew we wanted to co-create with Bishop Austin a strategic vision plan for the diocese, to discern together how God is calling us into the future that God desires for us. And while this is a committee of council, as you will see, it is composed largely of folks who are not members of council, but a wider group of people from around the diocese. And we recognize that as we're continuing to move more deeply into this process, that we need the active participation of the whole diocesan community, really, to be engaged in prayer and discernment with us. And so that's the invitation tonight, is to continue to do this work together. Next slide, please, Ellie. So the vision plan is intended to communicate our shared values and give us an inspired common direction for concrete aims. So it's about both who we are called to be as the people of God in this diocese, our identity and values, and then based on that understanding, what we're called to do. Some areas we already know that the plan will encompass are fostering greater trust and collaboration among congregations, between congregational and diocesan leaders, and between the bishop and clergy. In addition, it will include developing leaders and fostering innovation by recognizing and empowering the wealth of gifts among our clergy and laity in the diocese. And this we know in part because these were concerns that were raised in the diocesan profile as and confirmed by the listening process. Next slide, please. So the scope of the plan will really be determined by the work of the Vision Committee in prayerful dialogue with the members of the diocese. So what it will finally entail is a work in progress. If we already knew, but the result would be we wouldn't need to do the work, right? But we have some educated guesses based on the feedback collected in the bishop search process and what we continue to hear from all of you. So congregational development and diocesan governance structures, how we can improve transparency and accountability and mutual resourcing. Relationships among congregations, clearly articulated desire for deeper relationship and working together across a variety of ministry areas. Addressing diversity and our history of racial and economic injustice in our country, in our region, in our church. Creating sustainable systems, making sure we're financially resourced, and that we're prioritizing the ministry areas that we think are most important, and other issues as they arise. We're continuing to learn as we go along. Next slide, please. So Ellie, if you would click on that hyperlink, I will introduce folks to who the members of the SVC are. So Todd Bryant is the rector at St. Timothy's in Danville and is also a member of Executive Council. The Venerable Miguel Bustos is one of our archdeacons. He also serves on the presiding bishop's staff, working in the area of racial justice and reconciliation. Tricia Christensen is a lay leader at Christ Church, Portola Valley. She's also a member of the board of directors of the Episcopal Impact Fund, one of our diocesan institutions. Canon Amy Cook is our canon for formation on our diocesan staff. Felicia DeMond is a longtime lay leader at St. Paul's in San Rafael. Evan Diocariza is a lay leader at Grace Cathedral and serves on the Cathedral Council. Adam Dormus is a delegate from Good Shepherd Berkeley and a lay preacher and leader at Good Shepherd. The Reverend Laura Eberly is the deacon in charge at St. James Santiago in Oakland. Jacob Moody is a retired United Methodist minister who is also a member at St. Paul's in San Rafael and has an extensive background in nonprofit management and strategic planning. The Reverend Will Scott has served in the diocese for many years in a number of capacities. He's currently a member of Executive Council and is the priest in charge at St. Anselm's in Lafayette. Jocelyn Sadeko is on staff for Formation Ministries at St. Paul's in Burlingame. Debbie Thomas was recently on staff at St. Mark's Palo Alto. She is also a postulant for holy orders in our diocese and a noted writer, spiritual writer, and retreat leader. The Reverend Liz Titchener is the rector at Church of the Resurrection of Pleasant Hill and has previously served on Executive Council. And then the Reverend Dr. Nancy Weens is the consultant of the process. She is a Presbyterian clergywoman, spiritual director, and consultant to individuals and organizations in discernment work. She also hangs out at St. Columba's Inverness. So she's, we kind of claim her as one of ours. Okay, we can go back. Next slide, please.
Who are you, John?
Oh, you all know who I introduced myself up top. I'm also on the committee. Let me say just a word about the committee composition. Members of the committee, again, part were appointed as members of Executive Council. The others were recruited through a process of conversation with members of council, with the bishop, with some of our regional deans, folks involved in the Vital and Thriving ministry, with the idea that we wanted to get as broad a representative group of folks as we could across a number of demographics and including geography from around the diocese. And it's proven to be a really wonderful group, and I'll say a little more about that later. So when Bishop Austin came on board and began to participate in the co-creation of this process, he had kind of four parameters that he articulated very clearly that that we, being members of the committee, I think were very much in agreement with, so no surprises. But one was that we wanted a discernment model rooted in prayerful listening and learning that draws us closer to God's vision for the diocese. So not just a typical kind of corporate model of strategic planning, but one that is suited to the church's life and mission. And realizing that the main partner in this work is God the Holy Spirit. And so we need to make space for that. Second was that the process should foster building the beloved community and healing any experiences of us versus them and moving us toward a we in the diocese. Third, that this process would include building structures that help us to be more connected and effective. And again, that clearly resonates with our profile. And finally, that there's no predetermined outcome. We are discerning God's vision together. Like it or not, Bishop Rios did not come with a ready-made plan in his back pocket. I know sometimes we wish the church would just tell us what to do and have a plan for us, but alas, we are responsible for being co-creators with God in this. And that's what we're trying to do. So next slide, please, Ellie. Now, in terms of the particular model that we are employing, we are blessed to be in the Bay Area with wonderful resources in planning and discernment in the life of the church. One of those treasures is Sister Elizabeth Liebert, who has taught in seminaries here in the Bay Area and has done a lot of consulting and discernment work. She developed a model along with Dr. Weens and others that is a discernment model adapted for use with organizations. So it's based on the kind of model that individuals may be familiar with, especially from the Ignatian tradition of discernment, but it's been adapted for use in organizations. It's based on a book called The Soul of Discernment, a spiritual practice for communities and institutions. And I'm not going to go into depths here. It's a little over my head and beyond our time frame tonight. But I just wanted to give you a sense that the process begins with noticing and describing the current situation in the system. So that's part of the work that the committee has already begun to undertake. And that was part of the work of the listening process. And then moving into social analysis, doing some research on demographics and history and culture of the organization and its context. The committee has begun to move into that phase already. And there'll be more to come in the next few months that members of the diocese will be involved in that social analysis piece. And then theological reflection and prayer about what we've learned and how we have seen God at work with us. Moving into decision and confirmation, actually developing a plan. And then finally implementing and evaluating. So that's the cycle that we'll be engaged in. It's an iterative process. And it's one that will continue as we live into this vision over time. Next slide, please. Thank you, Ellie. So as many of you know, we began with listening sessions with Bishop Austin so that we could begin to notice and describe together, and so that he could begin to become oriented to us and to our diocese, and we to him. There were really four aims for these sessions. One was listening as a whole body to help all of us be part of nurturing trust and wholeness, and discerning together. For Bishop Austin to have a chance to listen to what is alive in us, both painful and joyful, to get a sense of the pulse of the diocese, for people to begin to experience shared values together, and thus begin to nurture trust with each other, and for Bishop Austin to have a chance to listen to what, that was a piece that got repeated. To begin to inform the work of the committee as well, as we move into the listening, describing phase of the model. Next slide, please, Ellie. So through September and October, early October, we held listening sessions with Executive Council, with diocesan staff, with our diocesan clergy at the annual clergy retreat. And then there were four public sessions for everyone at St. Stephen's Orinda, Nativity San Rafael, St. Ambrose Foster City, and an online Zoom session. We used the Examen prayer to reflect on our experience of consolation and desolation with respect to our diocese. All the sessions provided for Spanish translation interpretation, and the online session also provided for closed captioning. Each session included time for individual reflection, sharing in dyads, and sharing in the larger group. In addition, written responses were submitted in person and online. More than 400 people participated in one or more of these sessions, and more than 300 submitted written responses. And those, the initial themes and needs identified in that feedback will be shared by Bishop Austin and Dr. Wiens tomorrow. Next slide, please. So this process of listening is going to continue. And there are three ways immediately that you can continue to participate. One is by going to the DialCal website. Ellie, if you can go ahead and click on that. Here you will find the Examen prayer practice that we used as the basis for discernment about our joys and concerns, our consolations and desolations. You'll find an FAQ document, and these are all in Mandarin, English, Spanish, Tagalog, and Tongan. And then you'll find a feedback form that you can click on to submit your own response to the fruit of your Examen prayer practice. So that website is up and available. I would also commend that as a resource, not just for individuals, but perhaps for congregations who want to use those resources for our collective discernment in this process, and perhaps for your own discernment as a congregation. In addition, there has been an email established, vision@dialcal.org, that is a confidential email that is seen only by Bishop Austin. And so if you have matters that you would are concerned about or happy about, you can send those directly to him, whereas the other feedback will go to the SVC, the Vision Committee. And then finally, Bishop Austin is planning quarterly gatherings in which he will meet with 2 deaneries at a time to continue the process of listening and dialogue together. And that next and initial session will be on Saturday, February the 1st from 10 to noon at St. James Santiago in Oakland. And that'll be for Alameda and Southern Alameda deaneries. We recognize that in this first round of listening sessions, we were not able, just due to scheduling constraints, to get to every deanery in the diocese. So do know that this is going to continue as a practice for the immediate future. Next slide, please, Ellie. Okay. So this gives you a sense of the timeline. June through August of this year, we were recruiting and training members of the SVC. The diocesan listening sessions with Bishop Austin took place in September and October. And the SVC began to do its own work examining diocesan structures. We're now moving into the data gathering and social analysis phase of the cycle as a committee. In January next year, we'll be doing more data gathering, including targeted interviews with different members of the diocese, different constituencies and organizations, to expand and deepen our understanding of the structures in our system. In February and March, we'll begin collating and coding patterns and insights from the research we've done. We've scheduled a March retreat, a day-long discernment retreat for the committee with Bishop Austin to reflect on our learnings. May through July of next year, we'll begin forming the plan, and the July Executive Council retreat will probably be, I imagine, one place where we'll begin to flesh that out and get some feedback. And then we'll be beginning to disseminate and implement more detailed plans beginning in the fall of next year, with a final presentation to diocesan convention expected October 2025. I would caution that this is an ideal timeline. I told Bishop Austin when I first met him that I didn't know that we would be able to, whether or not we'd be able to meet that deadline. It depends entirely on what comes up in the process. Adaptive change can only work at the speed of trust. And so that's the speed at which we are going to do this work. And if we find that there are bumps in the road where we need to do some healing and reconciliation work as a diocese, then we will attend to that. And that will, inform and shape, the final outcomes. And again, it's iterative. Discernment will continue after October 2025 as there's ongoing evaluation and new learning that happens. So this is just getting us started in the common life that we're going to be sharing with Bishop Rios in these next many years, we hope. Next slide, please. Several thank yous I want to call out, especially to our listening session host, the Bishop's Ranch, St. Stephen's in Orinda, Church of the Nativity, St. Ambrose, Foster City, and St. Ambrose Lafayette, who hosted the Executive Council session. The hospitality and joy of the people of this diocese is really incredible. And it has been such a privilege to be able to wander around the diocese in this listening process and to be received so warmly. David Patino and Gilberto Leon provided Spanish translation for us at all of these sessions. Many thanks to the number of folks who volunteered a great deal of time doing translation work for us, which is really important. especially Negalu Fusimalawi, who did the Tongan translations, Reverend Mary Chan Ong, who did the Mandarin translations, Reverend Dr. Pamela Stevens, who did our Spanish translations for us, the Reverend Leonard Oakes and the Reverend Yurick Fernandez, who did the Tagalog translations. Audrey Spinka, who's done the closed captioning for us. Our wonderful diocesan communication and formation staff, who have provided amazing logistical support. Canon Stephanie, Ellie, Canon Amy, and Karen. Of course, Bishop Austin, who has been so graceful and present throughout all these listening sessions. And Canon Sierra as well, who has brought a real spirit of joy and hope and care to our work. And all the amazing members of this committee and our consultant, Nancy. As I have prayed and learned with this group of people, I have been renewed in my own sense of hope for the future of the church, in the quality of their care and their prayerfulness and their wisdom. And it's such a privilege to work with them. And so I thank you for the opportunity to do so. Okay, that's it for me. We're happy to entertain questions. And Nancy, please chime in if anything I've said is wrong.
No, that was fantastic, John. Thank you. The one piece of the aims that got replaced with that duplicate was just the aim for people to experience Bishop Austin's empathic leadership and his presence, and to see firsthand that his intention is to create a strategic vision together.
Friends, in the chat, there's a question. Does the SVC have plans to support the fight against the current global climate crisis?
That is certainly one, I think, of a number of ministry priorities that have been expressed in the course of the listening sessions. And I think in particular, finding ways to collaborate more fully together across congregations to address that and other needs.
Thank you. There are some questions coming in, so I'll continue to read them.
Thank
A glowing note from Paula Hawthorne saying, an excellent, very clear and important presentation. So thank you, John and Nancy, for that. A question from Rebecca Hayes Estera. What does repair and reconciliation look like?
I'm going to tip that one over to Dr. Weens, because it's really one of her specialties.
Because I have an answer, right?
Yeah, I think the answer is we don't know, but we're going to find out.
Yeah, so let's see, that was Rebecca. Thank you so much for this question. I think this is one of the big questions that we go in listening for, and the seeds of the answer will come from the seeds of the pain. One of the graces that happens through God's love for us and our being bent toward healing, bent toward reconciliation as human beings, is that inside the pain is the revelation of what the healing will look like. And so we do this listening in order to bring empathic presence and bring companionship, but we also do it to listen for what is the wisdom inside the trauma, is another way to talk about that. So today, if you were following the news, President Biden went to make the first formal apology, presidential apology to Indigenous people for taking their children and putting them in boarding schools, the attempt to erase their entire way of being. And that was the first time after all these decades, even though there's been many written things. So this face of repair is a formal presidential apology. There have been written forms in the past. There have been religious leaders who have made apologies in the past. So the face of apology, repair, reconciliation will look distinct for the community that was harmed. So the fingerprints of the wound is what will give us some guidance about that. And there will be some universal is a big word. There will be some common elements that we might want to try in a variety of settings, but there will also be some particular things that will need to be done. And that's something we're listening for. So if you have hints or ideas about what that looks like, we would love to know. And my email address is I will put that in the chat, and I will also make that available tomorrow in the presentation that Bishop Austin and I will be leading tomorrow.
So I see two questions in the Q&A, one from Stephanie about how will the interviewees be chosen for the data interviews beginning in January. So part of the background for that is that the 14 of us who are serving on the Strategic Vision Committee have each selected out of our own experience a structure within the diocese that we are particularly exploring. So in my case, it's Executive Council. Another example is mission congregations. Another example is accessibility issues in the diocese, physical and otherwise. So we want to go deeper in what we're learning in those areas that we've already identified just from within our group. But I think the other main criteria for choosing will be our ignorance. It's what we don't know as a team and need to find out about. So that might be diocesan institutions that we need to learn more about. It might mean meeting with members of diocesan staff to learn more about their ministries. It might mean convening some focus groups among different constituencies, like groups within diocese for whom English is not their primary language, etc. So that will be clarified, I think, as we're moving through this social analysis process of the model, and identifying the needs and themes that have emerged from the listening process, which you'll hear more about tomorrow. Those, I think, will be guiding us in terms of who we need to be talking with more. I do not know that the SVC will be able to visit all congregations in 1 year. Leonard Oakes raised a question for the listening, discerning part of healing. But I think what we will be able to do is to convene gatherings as needed of folks in the diocese to attend more deeply to listening and healing together. And I know that Bishop Austin will be attentive to that as he continues with these quarterly gatherings, bringing 2 deaneries together at a time. Sally Bingham, I do not have an answer to your question about who's representing the Episcopal Church at the climate conference this year. Maybe Bishop Austin can respond to that.
Yeah, the presiding bishop-elect is in charge of assembling that team, and I believe is already on that, but I don't have any other details other than that.
Could I speak to Debbie Lowe Skinner's comment? Is this an okay moment, John, to add that?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for bringing that to us. Her question has to do with, will we be attending to the pains and the difficulties, as well as the things that the diocese is doing beautifully? And that's exactly why we, one of the many reasons, but we chose the Examen prayer, Debbie, is because the Examen helps us notice where have we already been experiencing the Holy Spirit among us and moving? Where have we noticed it? Where have we collaborated with it and expanded it and centered it in our lives? And some of the work that I get to do when I'm not working with you all is support couples in the vitality of their lives. And one of the things I talk about with them is how really important it is to have a greater proportion of thank yous and gratitudes than concerns and could we change this? And so my hope, Debbie, is that we're going to keep paying attention to where the Spirit is moving among us that we feel grateful for. And in fact, that's how tomorrow's presentation is going to begin. So thank you for orienting us that way. And I'm completely with you, not only for the psychological research on how couples thrive, but for the spiritual clarity that following the Holy Spirit invites us to be part of this beloved community and where the kingdom is already manifest with us. And then from that place of gratitude and really glory to God, then we'll have greater clarity about where we might take next steps to support if there's repair, when there's repair and reconciliation needed.
I think one of the blessings of this listening process has been just to experience the joy that people share in just being together in the same room and meeting people they don't know, seeing old friends they haven't seen in a while. I think COVID really undermined our sense of connection and community as a wider diocese in ways that we've not yet fully realized. So just the simple act of meeting together has been generative, I think. And I think it's going to continue to bear fruit. I'm just seeing a comment in the chat about, oh, yes, not assuming that people who speak the same language are homogenous. Thank you very much. I think it's from Marta Alvarez. You know, that should be obvious to us, right? I mean, English speakers know that. Just because you speak English doesn't mean we're all alike. You know, we all have different backgrounds and cultural affinities and formative experiences. And that's true in other communities as well, whether it's whatever language they share. And thank you for that reminder.
I see a question about Spanish speakers on the Vision team. My understanding is that Laura Eberly speaks Spanish. I'm unclear. I've not heard Miguel speak Spanish, so I can't speak to that. But I know that, as far as I know, Laura does, given her location at Santiago St. James. So I'm hearing they're not Spanish speakers. Okay, I beg your pardon.
Now, Laura and Miguel are not fluent. Liz is probably Tishner is probably the best Spanish speaker in the group. Oh, I'm sorry. I will let Miguel speak for himself. And of course, the bishop.
I think one of the things that's worth saying is that we're aware that in trying to get a team together that was both representative of the diocese and also functionally small enough to be able to do work together, that there were going to be parts of our diverse body that, you know, were going to feel like we weren't 100% there. I think one of the important things to share is, at least in my early reads in the Diocese of California, there's a great value placed on access and representation. And I actually feel like one of the things that is important, I'm not saying that it isn't. However, I think engagement and the active listening that we're trying to do as a larger body means that those perspectives have to be a part of our vision plan going forward. And so even if the members of the team are maybe not the people that you would have chosen, my hope is that it is at least representative enough of our larger body to be able to do that larger listening together. And we've begun that work so far. So I ask for a little bit of patience in that process, and also trust that we're going to get there. We're going to get there together with God's help.
I would just add that I think one of the things that we knew going into this process, but that it still, at least for me, can be kind of surprising at times, is the extent to which our diocesan leadership does not represent the diversity of the communities that we serve. And that is something to which I know we aspire, but we still have a lot of work to do.
I'd like to go back and just acknowledge that the participants can't see the chat. So I want to just go back and say that Miguel chimed in and said he does speak Spanish. It wasn't clear what we were referring to just a few moments ago. And Laura Eberly says her congregation has taught her a lot, but she's not a fluent Spanish speaker, nor is she culturally Latino. So thank you for reminding us that we need to do a question answer format as we respond.
I am not seeing any other questions in the chat or in the Q&A. So if you have further questions, please don't hesitate to contact me or Nancy. And we can, I know my email information is in the FAQ document that's online. We can also put that in the chat. As well as, so, you know, please let me know if you have questions. And feel free to also direct them to members of the committee who you may know. It really is a privilege to be able to be in conversation with you about our common life and the ways in which God is already at work with us. So don't be afraid to nudge us.
John, would
Thank
you
you,
be
Rev.
willing, John, would you be willing to put your email in the chat? Some folks are asking for it there, and mine's there, and I can put it in again if anyone. Oh, wow, John, that was very quick. Okay, I don't type that fast, so I think that's all.
I didn't know I had the power to do it, so I'm glad to know. Okay, it's there.
Thank you for the presentation and for the willingness to answer all the different questions that came in and the thoughts and feedback this evening. The next part on our agenda, which we'll move into at this point, is the initial report from the Committee on Nominations, which I will invite Stefan Siptrot to give.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for gathering. Ellie, do you have the slide presentation handy, or should I pull it up?
I do not have the slide presentation for that.
Stephen, while you're doing that, I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you to Reverend John and to Dr. Nancy for all of their work on this visioning process. I could not be more thankful to work closely with the two of you for your willingness to be open to the Spirit's leadership, for your honest care and concern for all members of this diocese and those who are not a part of our ecclesiastical body. And I have experienced some of those wonderful, rare joys that come with church being church as a part of this process with y'all. And we've experienced it in those listening sessions together so far. And I'm really excited about where God is leading us, even if I don't know exactly where it is yet. So thank y'all for all the work you've done to help get us to this point.
Thank you, Bishop Austin. And thanks everyone for gathering. My name is the Reverend Stephen Siptroth, and I had the pleasure of serving as the chair of the Committee on Nominations this year. Our report to the convention will be in two parts this evening. I will go over our nominations process and introduce you to the committee, and then also briefly introduce you to the nominees for offices that will be elected at convention tomorrow. And then tomorrow morning will be another introduction in a little more detail of the nominees and moving the names into nomination. This year, the committee was represented by a number of really wonderful people and really faithful people who offered their gifts and wisdom in service to their church, out of love to their church. And I would ask that if you run into any of them, just say a word of thanks. I'm very grateful for the work that we did together this year. From the Alameda Deanery, Reverend Jim Dolan and Don Miller were on the committee. Jim Wyant was a member of the committee from the Contra Costa Deanery. I also represented the Contra Costa Deanery. And the Marin Deanery was represented by Bill Burrell and Anna Haight. We did have some vacancies on the committee this year, 2 each from the Peninsula, San Francisco, and Southern Alameda Deaneries. And we were represented, the standing committee representative was the Reverend Jane Stratford. Christine Benson was on the committee from the Executive Council, and Reverend Brother Richard Edward Helmer, as the Secretary of Convention, was on the committee. Although we had vacancies on the committee this year, the workload was manageable. In years where we're going to be electing the General Convention deputation, it would be better to have a fuller committee so that the work can be shared a little more. And so if you're a deanery president or a member of one of our deaneries, of one of our congregations, and you feel called to this work, I would invite you to think about it, pray about it, and reach out to anyone on the committee to talk about it. And we would love to talk with you about joining the committee and doing this really wonderful work. This year, our nominations process started in May as we started to plan our process. And then over the summer months, we solicited nominations and tried to get a wide distribution of our invitation for people to consider who might possess the wisdom and skills and gifts to serve this diocese in one of the offices that would be elected at convention. Because of the nominations were initially slow in coming in, we did extend the deadline, but we ended up with a number of nominations at the end. And I think we have just a really wonderful slate of people who we'll learn about shortly. Through August and September and leading up to convention, all of the requirements to stand for election were satisfied by our nominees, including anti-racism and safe church trainings. And many thanks to Amy Cook and Karen Miles, who made sure that our nominees understood the trainings that were required and the reasons for it, why these trainings are so important to our common life and to leaders in our church. At the end of our work together, we ended up with nominees for all of the offices to be elected. And it's as in years past, it is truly a wonderful slate of people who have offered their gifts and wisdom out of a desire to serve their church. For the standing committee from the lay order, we will elect one person to a regular term, and the runner-up in that order will serve the remainder of a vacant term, a position that became vacant recently. And from the lay order, we have Don Miller and Vinnie Zhang Miller. We'll also elect one person from the clergy order, and this year our nominees are the Reverend Jim Dolan, the Reverend Beth Foote, and the Reverend Stephen Tiffinson. For Executive Council, we will elect 2 people to serve, and at least one must be lay. From the lay order, the nominees are Brad Barber, Anthony May, and Christian Rideout. And from the clergy order, we have the Reverend Kira Austin Young and the Reverend Annalise Deal. We have 1 nominee each for Secretary of the Convention and Treasurer of the Diocese, and for Secretary it is Reverend Brother Richard Edward Helmer, and for Treasurer it is Lane Ringley. We'll hear more about the nominees tomorrow. Again, I would just like to extend a huge thank you to everyone who had a part in our work this year, from the members of the Committee on Nominations that I mentioned earlier. Ellie Simpson was critical again to the work that we did this year and did an amazing job at distributing information, updating web pages, and doing a lot of the work that got information out and that kept information accurate. Amy Cook and Karen Miles and our other diocesan staff who helped us confirm the trainings had been satisfied and that people were qualified for office. All of these people chipped in some way or another to help us with our work. And I'm very grateful to every nominee and every person who spent time discerning who might possess the wisdom and gifts and skills to serve in our church and in our diocese. I'm extremely grateful for every nominee, including those who had to step aside or decided that this year may not be the best and withdrew from nomination. And I'm grateful for everyone who is discerning whether and how to serve in the future. We will elect leaders again next year, and so discernment can happen between now and then, and I encourage those who feel called to positions of leadership in the church to engage in that discernment, and don't hesitate to reach out to talk with anyone on those bodies that you may be thinking about joining or nominating someone for. With that, the first half of our presentation is complete this evening. We'll be back for part 2 tomorrow morning, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Stephen, I'm reading a question for you from the Q&A from Darren Miner. Why are there so many vacancies on the nominating committee?
That's a good question. And after convention, between now and the end of the year, I plan to try to coordinate a meeting with the deanery presidents and current members of the committee to see if we can talk more about how to encourage people to discern whether they may want to serve on the committee. Some people who served last year changed I know at least one person who changed their deanery, and so the deanery they moved to already had people on the committee, and others rotated off. And you'll see this year we will have at least 1, possibly 2 people from the committee moving on to serve in another office. So some of it is just the natural flow of people moving in and out. But I do think that it would be good to have a meeting with the deanery presidents and others to intentionally think about how we can bring people into this committee to share in this work. Thank you, Davey.
Yep, thank you. And there's a reminder from Christine that we can read the bios of the nominees in the agenda for the convention. So read up on all of our nominees, please.
Right.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I think we're a little early, but at the same time, I think we're ready to take a short break. So let's reconvene at 6:26. See you then. Welcome back, everyone. Hope your brief break went well. And you're ready for our last part of our session right now. I'm going to invite Mr. Dave Franquist to do presentations and Q&A on resolutions at this time.
Okay, thank you, Bishop. I'm Dave Franquist. I am a delegate from St. Aidan's in San Francisco and also chair of the Committee on Resolutions. We have a half an hour for our presentations and Q&A tonight, so we're asking our presenters to be as brief as is reasonable to allow time for Q&A. We will be presenting 4 resolutions. The first is resolution number 1, addressing Christian nationalism. We have 2 presenters. I'm not quite sure how they're going to divide up their time, but they are Pamela Cruz Buckingham and Paula Hawthorne. So Pamela and Paula, please take it away.
Thank you. I'll be giving the overview of why we are having this resolution, and then Pam will probably have the majority of the time in the actual details of how we want to go forward. So this is a resolution where we are asking our diocese to form a task force to determine how we are going to stand up for Jesus, to stand up against what is called Christian nationalism. I think we were all shocked on January 6, 2021, when the people who were attacking the Capitol were carrying flags and crosses that had Christian iconography on it. They claimed to be Christian. We didn't know what to think of them. They have been named Christian nationalists now, and our Episcopal Public Policy Network has defined Christian nationalism, a commitment to combining Christian and American identities. And the term describes those who have engaged in violent and hurtful narratives and falsely justified them through their understanding of Christianity. What we are finding is that this radical, although radical, Jesus was radical, I don't know a good word to call these people. Through their actions, it makes our evangelism harder. It makes it harder to approach people and say, would you like to go to church with me, if they are now thinking that Christians are homophobic and all of that. So this is our attempt to address this problem within the diocese, that is to help everyone come up with the right words, come up with the right way of approaching this so that we can stand up for Christianity. And with that, I'll give it to Pam, who's got the details.
Okay, hi, I'm Pamela Buckingham, and I also go to St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Oakland with Paula. I love Paula. She's always walking beside me, right? Jesus on one side and Paula is on the other. All right. So this is what we're hoping to achieve. The first thing is we really want to find ways to uphold our core values. This challenges us to grow and influence and talk about all the things that are working to conflate national identity with Christian identity. And this resolution is not just a response to this troubling trend. It's a reaffirmation of our commitment to the gospel and our call to stand against divisive ideologies. They threaten our faith and the cohesion of our community. We want a way to respond to this urgent crisis. Episcopalians run towards crisis. I feel like this is something that we're starting to run towards, but I feel like I want to pedal a little faster. Maybe get on a bike together now. I don't know. But Christian nationalism has been linked to polarization and exclusion within our society. So it's fostering an environment where some feel marginalized and unwelcome in spaces that should embody inclusivity and grace. This resolution calls us to confront these realities. We want to find ways to promote true discipleship by addressing Christian nationalism. We're committing to a form of discipleship that is grounded. It's grounded in humility and service rather than power and privilege. This resolution encourages us to model a faith that advocates for justice and equity. Challenging political rhetoric, excuse me, that misuses Christianity for nationalist purposes. And I think one of the most important things is that we want to engage our community in this. We want to engage our church in this. We want to engage our missions and our institutions in our parishes in this. We want dialogue around this, much like the dialogue we started with the racial training. Oh my God, I'm forgetting the name of it. Sacred Ground. I feel like this could build on sacred ground. Finally, this resolution serves as a call to action and that running towards crisis that I was talking about to begin with. And it challenges us to examine our beliefs, our practices, our church, and what role it played, and how we can change that and how we can reconcile that. And we need the language and the tools to reject ideologies that distort the gospel. And we need a little toolbox to help us do that on public media and out in public spaces. And together, I hope we can affirm our role as agents of love and reconciliation in a world that desperately needs it. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Paula and Pamela. I don't see any questions in the Q&A. If you have a question about Resolution 1, please type it in the Q&A. We'll give you a little bit of time to finish doing that if you're a slow typist. Not seeing any questions in the Q&A. So let's move on to Resolution 3. Resolution 3 is the 50th anniversary triennium of the ordination of women and local commemorations. We have two presenters lined up. They are the Reverend Cameron Partridge and the Reverend Paula Nesbitt. So Cameron and Paula, your turn.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, all. My name is Cameron Partridge, and my pronouns are he, him, and I'm the rector of St. Aidan's in San Francisco. I am a co-sponsor of Resolution 3 together with Reverend Dr. Paula Nesbitt and Warren Wong. As a member of our diocesan deputation to General Convention, I testified this past summer in support of D050, which our resolution this evening provides a flexible structure for us to enact locally. As I shared in Louisville, the 50th anniversary of the ordinations of the Philadelphia 11 and the Washington 4, the first women ordained to the priesthood in the Episcopal Church, is very meaningful to me. As someone who was assigned female at birth and who had begun informally discerning a call to the priesthood in my teen years, discovering a memoir of one of the Philadelphia 11 as a first-year college student changed my life forever. I was utterly inspired by the witness, the organizing, the struggle, the sheer chutzpah of these women and the allies who supported them, drawing on their experience from the civil rights and labor movements. In the years that followed my book discovery, as I came out as queer and later when I was in the ordination process as trans, I so valued and took courage from the ministries of the women, some of whom were also LGBTQ. This resolution invites us during this triennium to lift up these women and other pioneers of our diocese, several of whom are listed in the resolution, to honor their witness and learn from the challenges they navigated in this beloved church. Learning more about their struggles is crucial, particularly as we continue to have so much to do to eradicate sexism, homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia, intersectionally manifested not only in our world, but also in the church, in such areas as, for instance, pay equity and employment opportunities. Here in our diocese, we have much pioneering to celebrate and struggle from which to learn. In the late 1970s, my parish, St. Aidan's, was served by the Reverend Teresa Tannehill, one of the first women ordained to the priesthood in Diocal, on February 5th, 1977. Prior to that, St. Aidan's was served for a 6-month period in 1969 by the Reverend Phyllis Edwards, who was appointed by Bishop Myers to be the acting vicar of the congregation, the first time a woman had officially served in such a capacity in the history of the Episcopal Church. 4 years earlier, the Reverend Edwards had become the first woman to be recognized as a deacon in the Episcopal Church in a service at Grace Cathedral led by Bishop Pike. We have an opportunity to observe the 60th anniversary of that service next September. Reverend Edwards served in several other settings in San Francisco as well as St. Aidan's, often as part of a team, and notably at the Good Samaritan Mission and Resource Center, which was closed some years ago. What records we have of her ministry in Diocal point to her dedication and talent, her professionalism and compassion, and her struggle for access to steady employment at a time when her sheer existence as an ordained woman in the Episcopal Church was an anomaly. With the support of this resolution, I look forward to commemorating the Reverend Edwards and other pioneering women of our diocese, to celebrate their ministries and learn from the wisdom of their witness for the work that lies before us. I turn now to the Reverend Dr. Nesbitt.
Thank you. Although I was not ordained in the 1970s, I did have the privilege of being surrounded by a number of the Philadelphia 11 women and those who were pioneers during my early seminary years. And I think particularly of the Reverend Allison Cheek, who advised me that if I were going to go into the church as an ordained minister, I need to have the commitment to change the church, particularly the unjust structures. And that is what really excites me about the possibility of our diocese following up on the General Convention Resolution D005 with these diocesan commemorations. It's a way of acknowledging the many important contributions that ordained women have made in our diocese. The list that is part of this resolution acknowledges many firsts, especially among women of color, and commemorating their ministries, I hope, will inspire more young women, especially from underrepresented groups, to consider discernment for ordained ministry. This resolution also provides an invaluable means of recovering and sharing histories that otherwise might be lost. Cameron, for instance, has discovered archival material on Phyllis Edwards almost by chance that could easily have been lost, as well as many of the stories that we don't often hear or take for granted. This resolution isn't just about celebrating their ordinations, but also to remember the struggles and challenges that these women have faced, as well as the men who took risks in supporting them, and the laywomen who worked tirelessly on women's ordination. And for for us, these are real stories of hope that we can offer others, and particularly the generation and the generations who are yet to come into ordained ministry. I'd like to quote our colleague Warren Wong on this resolution when he said, quote, "We are very fortunate a number of these pioneers are still among us, and there are a few we now miss. We stand on their shoulders because of their call to ministry that has made our congregations and dioceses a church of disciples spreading God's inclusive love." Just a quick note about the advisory group. This is a group that will coordinate and recommend various diocesan-wide commemorations, but also will provide support and assistance to any parish commemorations or community commemorations that you might have, that you would like to lift up, that might not be on this list. We're hoping to make this inclusive and supportive, and also to act as a liaison to the wider church in commemorating a variety of women across race, ethnicity, age, and holy orders. And we really hope that you will join us in collaborating, working together, and commemorating together through this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron and Paula. We're running a little bit behind right now. I would remind our remaining presenters to try to keep their remarks to just a few minutes so there's time for Q&A. There has been one question, or I think maybe comment submitted. We will provide that to the presenters who can answer it offline. So I'd now like to proceed to resolution number 4, which is diocesan support for the Association of Episcopal Deacons. And our presenter is the Reverend John Owens.
Good evening, DioCal. I'm John Owens. I am the deacon at Christ Church Sausalito. I also serve on the board for the Association for Episcopal Deacons, and I am the representative for deacons across Province 8. Today, I would like to talk a little bit about Association for Episcopal Deacons. It's the only professional organization for deacons out there. It rose out of a need for deacons to have resources, to be able to have community and ability to talk amongst other deacons and cross-pollinate across our Episcopal Church. A lot of people don't realize that in the infrastructure of the Episcopal Church, there's no set up for deacons to be monitored by the national church or TEC. There's no office on deacons. So resources are just kind of sporadic based on what parishes may provide or what dioceses would provide. And so the Association of Episcopal Deacons rose up out of a need for what deacons needed for support. And over the years, it's been a very bare bones kind of infrastructure. We don't have a full-time staff or executive director. And so we've been trying to figure out how do you take an organization that's supposed to represent over 3,000 deacons and have a very minuscule staff, and how do you build infrastructure with that? And so we went to General Convention and we proposed a resolution. For the first time ever asked money. We've never asked for money for this ministry. And so General Convention did respond with a yes. And they put also an onus on the diocese and parishes to also support and uplift the ministry of deacons through the Association for Episcopal Deacons. And so out of this, we created this resolution for how we would like to do work here in DioCal to support it. And what we're getting out of this is not just a donation. And keep in mind, DioCal hasn't contributed anything to AED for many, many years. And last time we cut a check was maybe, I think, like 4 or 5 years ago in the amount of $200. And so we really haven't done enough, I think, to support deacons. And so what we're asking to help support AED and still get something back is for the diocese to be able to create a line item that would essentially make sure that every deacon has a membership. And membership has not required among deacons, but this is again another way, because that's how AED primarily runs. It's a membership organization, and this is a great way again to support our deacons in our diocese. And just to also be very clear, we are talking about vocational deacons. We're not talking about transitional deacons, because that's the work that we focus on. Any questions?
John, there's a question from Ken Paris. What about deacons who are life members and dues are already paid for life?
It really has no effect on the status. I mean, that was a one thing that if you've got that status, great. But I will say AD is no longer offering lifelong memberships because it's not sustainable. And again, we're trying to build an infrastructure for sustainability. The way we're budgeting is basically we'll count the number of deacons. We'll see how many are retired deacons, because there's a different rate for retirees. And then we'll count how many active, and that will be our contribution. It's roughly a $5,000 impact on the diocese.
That was your
Any
question.
other questions? We'll
Thanks.
give you a minute or two to type them. Not two. A few seconds to type. So I'm not seeing any questions. So we can move on to our last resolution. This resolution has not been officially submitted to the convention because it was developed after the deadline for submission of resolutions. But we understand that it will be moved from the floor tomorrow, and the convention will have an opportunity to decide whether or not to consider it. It's been published in the convention booklet and on the website as resolution number 5, and is being proposed by Warren Wong. So Warren, would you like to speak to your proposed resolution?
Thank you. Good evening, Bishop Austin, Dial Cal clergy staff, and fellow delegates on its 75th Diocesan Convention. My name is Warren Wong. I'm a delegate from St. James in San Francisco and author of this floor resolution. Thank you for the diocesan community for allowing me to share and submit this as a floor resolution for convention to consider tomorrow during Saturday's session with the Resolutions Committee. The on-screen slide and DialCal website has the current version, which is slightly different from the version published in the convention book. The key difference is in the third resolve is much more concise, and I've also included a fourth paragraph in the explanation, and plus a few more endorsements. This legislation is a result of a long conversation with my senior General Convention deputy and Executive Council colleague from the Diocese of Southern Ohio. She became engaged since the rage and the fears started surfacing in the greater Springfield, Ohio area. Afterwards, we agreed that the church-wide community should speak up and address an injustice targeting the Haitian community after September 10th. We discussed the similarities between the Springfield episode and the explosion of the AAPI hate crimes targeting Asians and Pacific Islanders in 2020 and 2021. I suggested that our DialCal convention was meeting in October and just before Executive Council of the Episcopal Church meets in November. And I shared that our diocesan community has the heart and the prophetic voice to step up. And we agreed to submit, and that's why I'm sending this mind of the convention type resolution for Executive Council to allow church-wide leadership to make this a priority as matters go forward. This is references to prior resolutions passed by Executive Council, which is the one on the beloved community, MW024, as well as the AAPI hate crime one, which was MB 25. Therefore, I ask that the convention consider this by a 2/3 vote for tomorrow's debate. Like I said, there are the resolves are there are 3 straightforward resolves and they're straightforward and non-controversial, and the explanation explains or references and how the policies of the church is involved here. Finally, now that Diocesan Convention has the new anti-racism and safe church standards, the clergy in the diocese are now understand a lot of the terminology and historical context about systemic racism. So let me leave this with you tonight for you to consider for tomorrow. One, let me leave you two questions. One, think about this. What is the largest diocese in the Episcopal Church? Not geographically, but the number of communicants. Question number 2, who is Dennis Kearney? DenisKearney. If you have a chance to Google that tonight, just what I'm going to ask you to do is just to wink at me across the plaza or wave an arm, the sense that you would get that point. Thank you for your time this evening, and I hope that you would think favorably about this. And I'm open to any questions people may have from the floor.
Okay, thank you, Warren. Again, if you have a question for Warren, you can type it into the Q&A. We have just a few more minutes left, so we can take 1 or 2 questions if you have any. Sometimes it takes people a little bit of time to type a question, so we'll give you a bit of time to do that. So I'm not seeing any questions coming in. If one does come in late, we'll pass it to Warren. And we're actually a couple of minutes ahead of schedule. So I will gladly turn this back over to Bishop Austin.
Thank you very much, Dave. Appreciate it. Dispatch, what's our next item of business? I believe it's the report from the Task Force on Truth-Telling, Reckoning, and Reconciliation. If so, I call on the Reverend Hannah Elise Cornthwaite.
Hi, all. My name is Hannah Elise Cornthwaite. I am the priest in charge at St. Cyprian's in San Francisco, and I use she and they pronouns. On behalf of our beloved chair, Laura Curlin, who is unable to be with us today, you get me, so I hope to do her justice. I'm not going to read off of my slides. Instead, I'm going to kind of more verbally share what our task force has been up to. But first, I wanted to remind all of us why this task force exists anyways. A resolution in 2022 came to our diocesan floor in response to it being over 10 years since General Convention initially called all dioceses to do this work. And it felt extra important for us to evaluate how we were actually doing. So we have reviewed the recommendations that came out of General Convention in 2009, as well as 4 recommendation changes that came out of the 22 General Convention that looked at establishing positions to help us do this work nationally and locally. Asked us to review the language of the Book of Common Prayer and Hymnal 1982, draw our attention to the intergenerational trauma caused by the oppression of Indigenous people, and urge dioceses and congregations to all participate in this work. So after convention last year, our task force sent out a survey asking congregations to share what anti-racism work y'all have been doing. And this kind of looked like Sacred Ground, book groups, and other communal anti-racism trainings. Sadly, we did not get much response with the requests that were in the DialCal newsletter for many months. And based on what is in that same newsletter and my own being very nosy about what all your churches are doing, our task force feels very confident that more is happening than what we received. So our task force is exploring a better way to collect this data that doesn't look like Hannah going on to all of your websites and trying to subscribe to your newsletters so I get the info. Besides that, we have spoken with members of our UBE, as well as the Truth Telling Task Force in the Diocese of El Camino Real, and we hope to find ways to learn and share together. Members of our task force have been attending national-wise beloved community calls, as well as, I think it's Province 8, but it could just be California, discernment on land acknowledgements. Why are we doing them? And if we should actually be doing them. And we have done a great deal of work compiling a massive list of books, articles, and other media that we will be making available to the diocese. So, coming up, so we are constantly looking for and collecting information for new anti-racism trainings, as well as listening to and digesting all of your concerns around current anti-racism trainings that we are using in the Diocese of California. From our listening, we have heard so many snippets of information about churches that are no longer here, that have closed. Specifically those who served predominantly non-white church folks. And we are deeply wondering how we can keep these stories told, both for the sake of remembering, but also lifting up the joyous moments of our diocese and making sure that we aren't repeating patterns. Which brings us to some of our next steps. First, we are so jazzed to have our most fabulous canon for racial, social, and environmental justice. And our intention is to continue to meet and support and share in the work the Very Reverend Eric Matoye is doing. As mentioned before, we will be working with communications and our formation working group to get the resources we collected out to all of you. And lastly, we hope to refine our recommendations to put them into actionable and less overwhelming items. If you have any questions or want to participate in this committee, this task force, not committee, maybe they're the same, who knows? Please email us at dialcal_. It's on the screen. We'll also put it in the chat. And let us know. And if you have ideas also about how to get better feedback from all of you, we would love to hear that too. So thank you very much for your time. And I'm excited to see many of you tomorrow.
Thank you, Reverend Hannah. Appreciate it. I believe we are on to announcements right now. Do we have any announcements for the good of the body?
I do not have any additional announcements from what we announced earlier this morning.
Could it be? Is it possible? Y'all, it's Friday night. It's 7 o'clock. We have a big convention tomorrow. So we're going to pray out of here, and I'm going to see y'all in person tomorrow, okay? This is a prayer from our evening prayer service, but I'm going to pray it in Spanish. It's the collect for the presence of Christ. El Señor sea con ustedes. Oremos. Quédate con nosotros, Señor Jesús, ahora que la noche se acerca y ha pasado el día. Sé nuestro compañero en el camino, enciende nuestros corazones y despierta la esperanza, para que te conozcamos tal como te reveles en las Escrituras y en la fracción del pan. Concede esto por amor de tu nombre. Amén. Rest well, everyone. See you tomorrow. Thank you, Brother Angel, for all your help today. Appreciate it.
Coffee and breakfast starts at 7:30 on the plaza.
Good night, Ellie. Thanks for everything. See you in the morning.